Hey everybody, and welcome to another installment of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I take a look at all the games from my collection that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of December 2022. Now I have quite a few games here to rattle through, so I'm going to be quite quick on how much time I spend on them. But before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retail when it comes to acquiring board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with Samurai. So I deliberately wanted to try Samurai at 2 players because I think that's the only player count I haven't tried it at yet. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to try and compare it to another game already in my collection called Caesar Sees Rome in 20 Minutes, because there's a lot of shared DNA between the two. And if I can have one game to replace 2 games, then I'll certainly look at doing that. And I'm really happy to say that I think Samurai plays exceptionally well at 2 players. It's an extremely tight experience, not much margin for error, and it still adds all those crunchy decisions as if it was a specific 2-player game. So it looks like this one may have just culled a game from my collection, even though that's no shade on the other game, because I think Caesar's a great game, but this one is just that much better. So yeah, love this classic Reiner Knizia area control style game. That is Samurai. I played a 3-player game of Splitter. So this is a simple roll and write style game, one that was a candidate for my kind of hidden gem of the year, I suppose, where you're rolling a pair of dice, you're rolling the pip values in a mirrored image on this grid and trying to complete sets of numbers. That's as simple as the game is. It's quite random and it's quite chaotic in terms of what you're going to roll. Sometimes you're going to do well, sometimes you're going to do terrible through no fault of your own. But because it's a 10-minute game or 15-minute game, it is a lot of fun, and I'm still playing this one and still enjoying it. I played a 4-player game of Just One. So this was on Christmas Day, so Just One is one of the only games that my dad will play. This is a really cool word association style game. If you're watching this video, you're going to know what this game is all about because it is a colossal hit. But yeah, still regularly hits the table for me. Sticking on the party game theme here, we played a 3-player game, I believe, of Crossed Words. So this is a word association style game, one that didn't really blow up as much as I thought it would, because I think the game is fantastic. As you are kind of writing these words in between these axes here, so you've got like the colours and the different categories, like this is actors and actresses. So you can say like, Robert Redford, because it's a colour and an actor, and so on. That's the gist of the game. You can be creative with your answers, and it's good fun. That is Crossed Words. Another game that my dad will play is Marrakesh. So Marrakesh, on the face of it, should be a terrible game. This is a roll and move style game, as whenever you're rolling that dice, you are moving this communal piece around the map, and then you are going to be depositing a bit of carpet down, and those carpet is going to matter in terms of end game points, because every bit of coverage you have is going to be a point. But it also means that in the future, if somebody lands on your carpet, you take money off them, which is your points, equal to the surface area of that carpet. It's got a certain charm to it. I actually played this a ton of times over the years, and I do quite like it. It's kind of a game that I'm never averse to playing, but it's not brilliant, but it's good for what it does. And if you are playing with a complete non-gamer, it's a good option. That is Marrakesh. I played a 3-player game of Botswana, which I just heard is having a reprint soon. But if you don't know what this game is, it is a kind of a real simple, bare bones, kind of commodity speculation style game, as you are playing these cards and then collecting any animal type. But the most recent card of any type you play corresponds to the points that each of these animals are going to be worth at the end of the game. So it has this kind of sudden death thing going on, where as soon as a 5th card of any type of animal is played, it might be a 6th card, the game is going to instantly end. So you need to be making sure that it ends just at the right time for you. So yeah, that is Botswana, a really nice one. Anybody can play that one as well. I played a 3-player game of For Sale, which I know is not the optimal player count, and I haven't played this game in quite some time actually. This has always been a bit of a go-to game for me, especially during the first kind of 2 or 3 years of my time in the hobby. But definitely remained held its place in my collection. This is one of the best filler games of all time. It's a simultaneous selection and bidding style game, or auction style game, as you are trying to bid for these properties, collecting them up, and then in the second half of the game you are revealing a number of checks equal to the number of players then everybody is going to be using those properties to blind bid for the check values. And it can mean that you get some really good bargains by, paying very little for rubbish properties, but then getting a good check value for it, depending on what the other players are playing. So yeah, love this one. I think we had quite a high scoring game. I think that might be because I forgot to take some cards out of the deck, but hey, it's good fun anyway. It's really nice to get it back to the table, and a solid reminder as to why this is one of the best filler games of all time. Now, speaking of great filler games, we played a 3-player game of Ohana Me. And again, speaking of hidden gems, this game is one of the best card games to come out over the last 3 or 4 years or so. A true great filler game, one that should be in most people's collection. Nobody really knows about it. It's a kind of drafting, a pass and draft style game as you're building these columns of cards, but you cannot play cards in between the cards you've already played. So every card here is numbered and you'll score in different ways. And I'm actually pretty good at this game. I don't know why, it just seems to always work out in my favour. And I think I might have broke the high record in terms of scoring. But yeah, I really like this one. It's so good. That is Ohana Me. Another game that my dad will play is Rapido, which is kind of Reiner Knizia's take on the classic game Can't Stop. So this is a pure push your luck style game. As you are climbing up this staircase, you're rolling a pair of dice. Those dice are going to be numbered from an X, which is basically your bust number, up to 6 or 7, depending on the dice you use. And if you roll a pair, you move up instantly, and then you're essentially trying to roll high numbers because you can secure a place on this staircase, which means if you're still on that staircase, when it comes back round to you, you get to move quite a lot of spaces automatically. But what this means is that if somebody rolls a higher number than you and goes on a lower space on that staircase, they can actually kick you off and stop you from moving up or advancing up that staircase. So it's really cool that you have some degree of control here. If you have a runaway leader, you can actually try to stop them. And it always, I've yet to have a bad game with this. Every single game seems to bring the excitement and the tension of the race, which is great because with a pure push your luck game with no player interaction, it can definitely go against you and you could just end up, somebody doing really well, rolling consistently good and winning just that way, feeling a bit deflating and a bit anticlimactic. But this one definitely gets around that by adding that degree of player interaction. I played a 3-player game of Fluoriferous. So this game I actually did have in the back of my head. In fact, I actually did physically put this on my sell pile of games, but something just wasn't sitting right for me. I thought, you know what, I do like this game. It's got a certain charm to it. It's a real simple, bare bones set collection game that's very easy to play, and it's good. There's some good decisions here, and yeah, I like it quite a bit. It doesn't do anything new, but what it does nice and concisely. It's a 20-minute game that looks very pretty to get out. So it's definitely one that can fill up that, again, use it as a true literal filler game to finish off a games night with a pretty low stakes game. So yeah, I like this one. I think it went down quite well, introducing it to a new player. And yeah, I think it secured its place in my collection for the meantime. So that is Fluoriferous. I played a 3-player game of Astral, candidate for my card game or filler game of the year. This is another pure set collection style game with some cool little twists on it. I mean, these designers who made this game, Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, they have such a great design pedigree, and I love their kind of thought process and the way they put their games together. But this is a game where you're managing your hand of cards. You're playing it on this card row. Now you can either collect the cards to your left and add them to your hand, or take the cards on the right and add them to your scoring area. And you need to really balance the two, or you can find yourself in a bit of trouble. And then you're trying to collect these sets of cards. The more sets you collect, the better, of course. But also, if you collect duplicates of the same card further along in the set you've collected, you can get big multipliers that way as well. Check out my review of this one if you don't know much about it, because it is a truly great filler game, and I really do like this one. So that is Astral. Also played a 3-player game of Capital Lux 2 Generations. Now this is one of my favourite games of all time. I think it's probably one of the best card games ever made. Now I did introduce this one to somebody who's not played it before, so I did use the pure basic version of the setup. I think that all the the A category cards, which is still a fantastic game, and I think it went down quite well. I mean, especially during the second half of the game where things start to click into place. And we had a nice tight game of this one. I think we all managed to get away with not losing anything by going bust, or maybe there might have been one player going bust once in the game. So it was a nice tight game. I think it's tight in scoring, and yeah, it's so good. I mean, I talk about this game all the time. I've played pretty much all the setups now, and it's just a gift that keeps on giving. I love this one. That is Capital Lux 2 Generations. I also played a 3-player game of Modern Art. So this game actually did slip out of my top 100 this year. I can't quite put my finger on why, because I do like almost everything about the game, to be honest. I love auction games. Now, I must have to say that I think sometimes the rules are cooler than the way it plays out in person, because this has one of the coolest scoring categories, or the way that the game scores, I think, ever, where you are building up the reputation of these artists. The more popular they become, it means they're going to be eligible for scoring. But then if they're not popular in a later round, then they're going to be worth nothing. And you're auctioning off these different pieces of artwork. Now, I don't know if this is my game group or the way we tend to play it. It always seems like any artist, well, there's never going to be an artist that doesn't score, basically. So we always just seem to keep adding on to the most popular ones rather than creating new ones or trying to, trap other players into investing in artists that aren't going to score. I don't know. Maybe it's just a more conservative way of playing the game. But it is something that I've definitely clocked onto and noticed about the game, that we always seem to follow that path. So, and I've got so many other auction games in my collection, and my friend does have a copy, so I think this one might be time for this one to leave the collection. So I'm still going to have access to it because my friend has a copy. But yeah, I think there's other auction games I'll play before this one. Next up, we have a game of Messina 1347. So this is a game, one that's, again, I've really spoken highly about this one over the last year or so. This is the second latest Vladimir Suki design. It's a kind of a worker movement style game as you're moving around this grid, or this hex grid of Messina, and collecting resources, collecting fire, trying to burn off these play cubes, building buildings. And I like this game a lot. This is a classic Euro, or it's a true Euro, I should say. Now, every time I've played this one, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it did quite well in my top 100 this year. Now, I must admit, this most recent time I played it at 2 players, despite being fantastic at 2 players in terms of how long it takes, because you can play this in about an hour, I feel like the pacing of the game is a little bit off, because the first half of the game, you are really getting a few points here and a few points there in terms of your income and your engine you're generating. But then there comes this turning point in the game where you want to start populating or repopulating the city of Messina. And the points you get from that are so significant, where it kind of attributes to 80 or 90% of your overall points. And for me, it felt a little bit weird where, you do the first four turns, not much happens. You do the last 4 turns, somebody invests in, say, 4 areas of Messina, and somebody invests in 3. The person who invests in 4 is going to win. Simple as that. Maybe I'm missing something here, but again, it's something else I have noticed. So again, I'm trying to trim down on my collection in terms of games that take longer to play. Not like this is terribly long, but this one might be one that doesn't make the cut, because I'm actively looking for faults in games in order to get rid of them from my collection. But I don't want it to sound bad, because this is a really good game, and obviously I've spoken highly of it over the years, or the last year or so. But yeah, it might be time that I have to be a bit brutal and get rid of this one too. So that is Messina 1347. Played a 3-player game of Photograph, a game that I played recently. Actually, I think this was in my top. It was on my roundup last month in terms of the games I played. A very restrictive little card game as you're trying to build these sets. It's got that scout mechanism where you cannot readjust cards in your hand, but it takes it to the whole new level because you are forced to play cards from your hand. So you basically take cards to the front and play them from the back, and you're trying to build these sets almost in like a Lost Cities fashion by creating runs of them. Really cool. You can definitely feel the kind of oriental inspiration from it, because they have, it's a Sashi game, and his games seem to have this certain feel to them that feel different to anything else, and that definitely shines through in Photograph. But I do like this one. It's one that's maybe a step more advanced, or a step more punishing, or kind of brain burnery than your average card game. But if I'm in the right mood for it, this one always goes down well. So that is Photograph. Played a 3-player game of Loading. So Loading is a game that came out, I think, a year or so ago. This is a real-time game that almost feels a bit like The Mind. However, it is competitive. Basically, you have the deck of cards. You are trying to play them in front of you in numerical order. You can create gaps, but all the different cards have points on them. So you ought to be trying to play as optimally as you can, but as soon as you play a card, you have to pass the deck to somebody else, and they're doing the same. So it's a real-time game, and you can also play cards on top of other players' decks and collect these bonus cards from them. So you're kind of giving points to get points back in return. It's really frantic, but it's way better than it should be, and I like it quite a lot, and I'm still yet to play this at the real high player counts, which I'm kind of itching to do really, because I think it could go down quite well. So that is loading. Really fun little card game there. Played another 3-player game of Mask Men. So I've actually just reviewed done a brief video review of this one, which I'll be releasing shortly. It's in a collection of reviews, I should say. Now, this is a game by Oink Games, as you can probably tell by the design here, and it is another kind of shedding ladder climbing game based on this kind of luchador theme. It's got some weird rules to it, ones that aren't so intuitive, because you are actually determining the strength of these suits as you go throughout the game, which is something that I've not seen before. But as a step above something like Scout, this is a really good one to check out. You might need to get a copy imported, but I think it's worth doing so if you want, or if you like those quirky, different little card games that are clever but thinky. This is a really good one. That is Mask Men. Played a 3-player game of Parade. Parade, been a while since I got this one to the table, but really glad I did, because my enjoyment of this one has not waned at all. This is like a queuing game, as you are, there's no artwork on the back here, but you are basically playing these Alice in Wonderland characters onto this queue. All of these characters are numbered, but the higher the numbers are great because it lets you skip over characters, because collecting characters is generally bad in this game. But the lower number ones, but the high number ones aren't great when it gets to a certain length, because every character after that you're going to end up acquiring, because you end up picking up any character that is either the same type or of a lower number than the one you've already played. So it's one of those games where you want to get the lowest score, so it's kind of a golfing style game, I call them. And I think I had probably the luckiest game ever in this one, where it ended up acquiring like 1 or 2 points, which is quite unheard of. And one of my opponents ended up getting all the bad luck and picking up all the characters and losing quite significantly. But it's quite funny. A real nice filler game. One that, again, criminally underrated, I think. Really nice to look at. And it just has that classic card game feel. That is Parade. Also played a 3-player game of Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers. This is another one where every time I play the game, I think, this is going to be the last time. I've played this quite a few times now. I'm ready to move on to something else, but every time I play it, it's always good. So this is, again, the roll and write version of the worker placement game called Rajas of the Ganges. And this one does a lot of the same stuff. You're building up this route from the temple here, collecting bonuses as you go. You're collecting resources and selling them to get points. And it has that mechanism that's been stolen from this game, actually, or the original Rajas of the Ganges, that's used in Arc Nova, where you have to meet your 2 different scoring types together, where in this one you're collecting coins and victory points, and as soon as they cross each other, then you're going to win. So it's kind of a sudden death racing aspect to the scoring. Now, I'm pretty good at this game. I don't know why, but I did win quite convincingly. I think maybe it's a bit more experience, because I have played this more than my opponents have. And yeah, it's really good. I mean, in terms of roll and write games, this is right up there with the better ones, which is kind of, a bit of an anomaly, really, because not many re-implementations of bigger board games, when they're condensed down into card games or roll and write games, they're normally not that good. Where Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers, I think is better than the original Rajas of the Ganges, which might sound controversial to some people, but I definitely think that is true. We also played a 3-player game of Letter Jam. So Letter Jam, another game that hasn't hit the table for a long time. Now this is a cooperative kind of a word-making game. Think of like, it's also got some deduction in it as well, as you are basically building a word, you're handing that word to your opponent, mixing up all these cards, and then throughout the process of the game, you're trying to help your teammates work out what each of these letters are, which will create an anagram, and then you're using that anagram to build the final word. But you're going to do that by building words using this kind of system where you're placing these tokens down associating to the letters, and of course you don't know your own letter, so you need to fill in the gap and deduce what your letter could be. It's really fun. I mean, it actually has this fun factor that doesn't quite shine through in terms of reading the rules or explaining the rules, but when you're playing it, you feel quite confident in what your answers are, but when the kind of end game reveal comes out, you are going to be miles wrong and make some mistakes along the way, and you can go back and look at where you went wrong and reflect on what you did. So this one, we actually played a real basic mode of the game where you play with only 5-letter words, which should be quite easy to do. And somehow we managed to go really wrong with it and not do very well at all. But despite that, we had a great time, and it's a real nice chilled out game. And if you like word building games and you like this style of thing, this is a great co-op one. And yeah, that mix of hybrid with the word game and the deduction game with the cooperative nature as well is fantastic. So yeah, this one has really held its own. That is Letter Jam. I also played a couple of other games that I don't have the physical copies here. We played a 3-player game of Timeline. We did, 3-player game of Timeline. This is just a simple game where you are trying to play cards in this row. Each of these cards has a historical event in it, and you're basically placing it before or after other historical events in that line. I really like it. I wouldn't actually mind picking up a copy of this of myself and adding a lot of the other cards into it, because you do come quite familiar with those cards quickly, and some of the events are way easier than others. But for a 5-minute game, this is fine. I'm not really picking fault in the game because of that. Next up, we played a 3-player game of Calico. Calico, another popular puzzly style game, as you are placing these tiles out on this board, trying to get patterns in lots of different ways, by surrounding these other tiles, by having, 2 of one type, 2 of another type, maybe 2 of another type, and so on, or trying to build patterns of certain colours or patterns within the tiles and so on. Very puzzly, very kind of min-maxy as you're trying to optimally place each single piece to score as many different criteria as you can. Generally speaking, I'm not very good at this game, but for some reason everything clicked into place this time I played it, and I did quite well for a change, so that was quite nice. But that is Calico. I like this one. It's definitely got some longevity to it. And I also played a game of Drop It. In fact, I probably played about 3 or 4 games of Drop It, because this is another game that my dad will play. This is actually probably my favourite dexterity game, as you're dropping these different shapes in this vertical board with these 2 kind of perspex sheets. You cannot allow your shapes to touch any other shapes of the same colour or the same shape. And it actually has some cool dexterity elements to it, as you can perfectly drop things in the right spot, try to get around those restrictions, get as many points as you can. Again, it takes around 15 minutes, and it's actually pretty damn good. So that is Drop It. And the final game I'm talking about this episode is Caesar's Empire. So I think it was another 3-player game. So if you can't tell, I play most of my games at 3 players. But yeah, this one came out with 2 awards in my Chairman's Choice Awards this year. I think it was the Family Weight Game of the Year and also the Pleasant Surprise of the Year. This is a fantastic game that came out in 2022. I don't think it's kind of met many people's top 10 lists, but I think if you like simplicity and you appreciate that kind of thing in board games but still has a lot of meaningful decisions, then this is a fantastic option. So accessible as you're building these routes out from Rome, collecting these different kind of tokens as you go as well. Simple set collection game, but also a route building game as you're tracing back your routes and getting points depending on who's built the routes on the way. Absolutely fantastic game and a true evergreen for me. So that is Caesar's Empire. So that's it really. That's all the games that I've been playing. I know there's more here than usual, so apologies if you wanted to hear more about them, but I'm pretty sure I've got a lot of content on these games, and I've probably talked about a lot about them over the months and years anyway. So hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.